Alright, hello. This is my Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi reaction video. I've kind of waited a couple days to kind of think about what I saw and try to kind of digest some things, but it's kind of the end of the weekend. Hopefully everybody's seen it. If you haven't seen it, turn off this video because this is going to be very spoilerific, but I'm just going to try to detail a lot of my reactions and a lot of the beef I had with this movie. I've kind of posted on Facebook and Twitter that I really didn't like this movie, that I thought it was particularly bad, and a lot of people seem to have a pretty different reaction from it to this. So I'm going to try to go into really elaborate depth here and what I had problems with and why I didn't think it was that good of a movie. This is probably going to be a ridiculously long video, but I just really need to kind of vent and rant a little bit here. So to start off, let's talk about expectations with Episode 7. Episode 7 was really just a reboot of the franchise. A lot of people were pretty disappointed with it because it was really just a rehash of pretty much every plot line in A New Hope. And it was just, it was a reboot. It got the movie series into a new generation. But, you know, as far as following the storyline of episodes 1 through 6, it really just recycled material. I mean, it was not something that really progresses the storyline. It was really just a reboot of the franchise, and a lot of people kind of had beef with that. I, at the time, kind of thought, okay, the reboot's out of the way. Now we've kind of set up for a episode 8 that I think can kind of, you know, take off from The Force Awakens and kind of start going into a new direction and start really developing kind of this new generation of Force users and stuff like that. And maybe those expectations in my head were a big reason why I didn't like Episode 8 so much, but those were kind of the expectations I had going in. Before I really get into like plot lines or anything like that, I want to talk about soft magic versus hard magic. And this is something that is, for me, pretty near and dear to my heart. This is like a storytelling cliche that so many franchises get into. Soft magic is a magic system that has no rules, that you can pull out at any time and just say magic and something happens. This is a really bad writing tool because you can write yourself into a corner, and no matter how badly you write yourself into a corner, you can just say magic and all of a sudden you are out of that corner. This is something that, you know, as much as I love Lord of the Rings, I kind of have a problem with the soft magic system in it because you don't have any rules to any of the magic that goes on. You just know that, you know, at this one point, you know, things can happen that don't make sense. It's just magic. It's just explained away by magic. Hard magic is the total opposite of that. It's much more like a video game where you have, you know, very codified cooldowns and how much attack and what it precisely does, and like you have an ability with very constrained you know, cost benefit analysis. You know exactly what this skill is going to do. It is a toolkit for you to use in certain situations, and some abilities don't work in certain situations. If you use an ability incorrectly, it sets you up in a really bad position, which then can be taken advantage of by an opponent. It's a logical system of magic. And one of the biggest pitfalls with science fiction and fantasy is that, you know, you have this soft magic system in so many things where you can just use magic to write yourself out of a corner without any consequence. And that is a really weak writing tool. And Star Wars in itself has, you know, it hasn't been entirely hard magic, but it's been closer to hard magic than soft magic. If you look back to the original trilogy, you know, we can see Jedi learning individual abilities. You know, we can see Luke trying to lift rocks. We can see how he's developing a certain kind of skill. And even though you can lift rocks, your opponent can lift rocks too. So, I mean, you have this advantage and disadvantage to using this skill. You know, wielding a lightsaber is something that can only be done by a Jedi in the original trilogy. The only time we see somebody who's not a Jedi holding a lightsaber is Han Solo, and he literally just uses it to cut open a tauntaun. You know, this is literally a blade of light that goes through anything. If you don't have force connectedness and you fumble your lightsaber, you can kill yourself. So the entire notion of being a lightsaber wielding person is force-based. It's training-based. This is something that has been set up from the very word go. And, as close to, it wasn't hard magic, but on the spectrum of soft magic to hard magic, the original Star Wars trilogy was pretty close to hard magic. We had well-defined rules for each of the abilities and each of the things that we were seeing on screen. And the newer trilogy, episodes 7 and 8, they're getting away from that. You're seeing a lot of soft magic. You're seeing a lot of these things that are being brought into the universe that they don't have well-defined cost benefit or benefit disadvantage, and it's just pulling something out of the air in order to say magic and make something happen because you wrote yourself in the corner. And the biggest example of that in this movie is when Leia does her spacewalk, and all of a sudden, no matter even though she's in zero atmosphere, she has zero oxygen, and it's near absolute zero in the vacuum of space, she's able to survive this and then Mary Poppins back into the cruiser. And this is just poor writing. It is specifically writing in a sequence of events that leads to a really bad corner that you then immediately turn on your soft magic to get yourself out of that corner. And it's just the epitome of bad writing. This is Deus Ex Machina, but with a magic system. This is really annoying. This is something that if you are trying to really sell an idea, you avoid at all costs, and here they are flaunting it in front of us. It's really annoying. There's a lot of things that can kind of be blamed in episode 7 for this because it really sets up for this. We see this with Rey's progression. She is kind of a Mary Sue in that everything thrown at her she deals with perfectly. She learns things at an insanely, abnormally fast rate. Luke in episodes 4 and 5, he starts his Jedi training, he gets his dad's lightsaber pretty early, and by the end of the second movie, by the end of Empire Strikes Back, he is fumbling with his lightsaber versus a geriatric Darth Vader. I mean, he can't hardly even fight him. Darth Vader's just toying with him. He's just, if anything, Darth Vader is training him at that point. He's not trying to kill him. He's just having a conversation with him and swatting his lightsaber aside, laughingly. I mean, it's not a fight. It's Darth Vader completely has the upper hand in that situation. And it takes 2 movies for Luke to get to that point. And here we have Rey, who is mastering some of the Force concepts that Luke didn't have mastered at the end of the second movie in the span of half a movie with the Force Awakens. And we see that again to another extent in episode 8, where Rey is just so unnaturally talented with the Force to a degree that it really breaks the mold. It really undoes, everything we've learned about how a Jedi trains, how a Jedi learns things, how you get adept at certain skills. This is really kind of getting into soft magic. This is really just kind of pulling something out to, have an ability to do something because you're not writing a very good storyline and you need something to kind of write you out of that corner. So that's all on that. So, a lot of the reactions for this have been, the reactions I've seen at least have been really good or really bad. People either like this or are really kind of lambasting it. And I, was kind of taking a little bit to think about why people are getting this different reaction. And the best thing that I can think of is, what are you expecting when you go into a movie? Some people just want to be entertained, and modern day Hollywood knows this. They know that they just need to sell opening weekend tickets. They know that you just want to see really flashy explosions, and it doesn't need to have a plot. It doesn't need to be going places. It just needs to be fireworks, and that sells a lot of tickets. That's why Transformers makes a lot of money. That's why Michael Bay is a director. That's why the new Star Wars or Star Trek movies rather get a lot of money, is because it's all just this flashy CGI and explosions, and people's ADD wants to see that. And I'm not a person who goes into a movie who to just be entertained. I want to be captivated. I want the storyline to make sense. I want to be entertained by a story. I want to be captivated by a story. I want to be emotionally involved with it. And in episode 7 and episode 8, it's really hard for me to say that I am. So much of this is just about, resting your laurels on top of what Star Wars was and creating these new characters that, frankly just aren't doing much for me. Rey, Finn, and Poe, they're pieces of, they're cogs on a gear, but they're not anywhere close to where a Luke or an Obi-Wan or a Vader was. These are pretty weak characters in comparison. All of this movie is about is, the pyrotechnics of, the resistance escaping the First Order, and it just doesn't have that it doesn't captivate me to the same degree that I was captivated in the original trilogy. That's a big part of my beef here. So I'm really spitballing here. I don't know if that's why some people are liking this, some people are hating this. I could be completely wrong on that, but just from kind of the comments I've heard other people say, what are you looking for in a movie? I mean, I want a story. I want to have something that is compelling, something that really draws me in, and yeah, it has cool fight scenes and stuff, but like, I need to have dialogue. I need to have character interaction. I need to have things that really make a story strong, and so many of those things are lacking in this particular movie. So moving on from that, one of my biggest problems with Star Wars, as much as I love Star Wars, the one thing that's really kind of annoyed me the most in Star Wars is this whole notion of duality. Light versus dark. You are either a good guy or you are a bad guy. And there is very little wiggle room in this gray area. And that gray area is, to the biggest extent, what makes stories interesting and compelling. When people really have decisions to make. When you're really, tearing at which way is moral, which way is right, which way do you go with something. This is something that I love about A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, is you have so many characters in there that are good one day and bad the other, and it's not just this super good character versus this super bad character. That's really compelling and captivating. And Star Wars, for the most part, lacks that. Here was an opportunity to really kind of dig into the gray. You've got a character like Kylo Ren who is struggling internally with the Force. You have, a perfect situation for him to kind of turn on that, and we know what happens, and it's really just kind of teasing that gray area and then pulling away from it. So I'm kind of following a list of things here, which is why I'm jumping from topic to topic, but I'll get more onto that later. So the next thing, lack of strong bad guys. And in the original trilogy, Darth Vader is like one of the most iconic badass villains of all time. It's probably impossible to get better than Darth Vader in all actuality. He is iconic at this point. You can see him in every media ever. He's Darth Vader, and you can't touch that. But let's compare him to General Hux and Kylo Ren, who are really, really, really bad guys. They are incompetent. They are loose with their emotions. They are raving lunatics. You see, it's like a bad Saturday morning cartoon where you have Inspector Gadget and the villain in Inspector Gadget. I can't remember his name, but you always see him just, "I'll get you next time, Inspector Gadget." And despite the fact that Inspector Gadget is completely incompetent, this bad guy can never foil him, and he always has to try next time. And that level of incompetence is absolutely seen in General Hux and Kylo Ren. I mean, they are just pathetic bad guys. And that is really sad coming from a franchise that had one of the best villains of all time. The other part of this is you have a good bad guy in Snoke. You have this mystery behind him. You have this intrigue behind him. Where did he come from? How did he get to be so powerful? all this stuff. And just in the middle of the movie, you kill him. He's just a red herring. He's nobody. He's just this guy who had a lot of promise and could have been your awesome bad guy, and you just sweep him under the rug for these two completely incompetent bad guys. That's infuriating. All right, so let's take a second to talk about some good parts of this movie, because this wasn't all bad, and right now I'm putting a lot of negativity into this. Good parts, the throne room fight was fun. I mean, as long as you kind of throw to the side that Rey should not be that good with a lightsaber. Even though Kylo Ren was training with Snoke, he probably shouldn't be that good with a lightsaber. We're talking about 6 elite guards who are charged with guarding Snoke, and Rey, who has touched a lightsaber 6 times at this point, is able to take out 3 of them without a lot of sweat. I mean, this is total Mary Sue. This is totally ridiculous. That all being said, the scene was pretty cool. I mean, as far as fight scenes go, it was really fun. And I was so anticipating where Kylo Ren was going to go at the end of it, because you set up perfectly for this situation where, Kylo kind of converts. He kind of, realizes that he's going down a really bad path, and he joins, and he doesn't have to join Rey. He doesn't have to be that good guy that you see in Duality. Maybe he just needs a minute to, rethink his entire life. Maybe he runs off from Rey, he takes some escape pod, and he goes off into nowhere, and you don't see him for the rest of the movie because he can't confront everything that's going on right now. That would have been a path I would have loved to see, because that would have been right in that gray area that Star Wars just can't even conceive of. But Kylo does something completely different, and Kylo redoubles down on the bad, and he is not only going to be Kylo Ren bad, but he's going to be a trope of a cartoon of Kylo Ren bad. I mean, for the rest of this movie, Kylo Ren looks like a raving maniac. Every time he's giving orders to First Order soldiers, every time, in the encounter with Luke, he just is an unhinged lunatic. And to me, this is not entertaining. This is just a Saturday morning cartoon with a hilariously inept bad guy. This was so frustrating to me, because Kylo Ren had the opportunity to be a really interesting character, and instead they drive down this path of just a caricature of a bad guy. Wasn't I supposed to be talking about good parts right now? Yeah, so Holdo's cruiser suicide. She, that was awesome. Like, as far as visual displays, what they did there, where she drives the cruiser at light speed through the Dreadnought, is awesome. I actually don't know if that's called a Dreadnought, if that was Snoke's main ship, or I don't remember the name of it. It was bigger than a Dreadnought, I think. But anyway, she drives her cruiser through it, and that sequence of visuals is pretty stunning. I mean, the audio cuts out, you see this big slash through the ship. That was really cool. That was really well done. I thought that was a really cool 5 to 10 seconds. Luke's exit, I was a little, I don't know, it makes sense narratively. I mean, you're going to call the movie The Last Jedi. It makes sense for Luke to leave at the end. It was kind of cool how he did it, but I have pretty conflicting thoughts here. In Yoda's exit in Return of the Jedi, Yoda's actually kind of dying. He's really old, he's getting sick and frail. It's kind of time for him to pass on, and it makes sense for him to pass on. He passes on the knowledge about Luke's sister to him at that time. It's a pretty important point, and it makes sense. Whenever Luke leaves, I don't get that feeling. This feels more like, you are at the beginning of this really big war between the Resistance and the First Order, and Luke is just kind of bailing on them. Instead of, using his Force powers to the best degree he can, he uses it all as a smoke and mirrors technique, and it exhausts him to the point where he passes on. It just kind of feels like, blowing your load way too early and not in the most effective way. I may be being overly critical on that, because, this movie is The Last Jedi, it kind of does make sense for him to pass on, but I'm still left conflicted with the idea that he does pass on. He doesn't even really train Rey. He doesn't really pass on a lot of the Jedi knowledge. He doesn't, do a lot of things that you would expect the Master of the Jedi Order to do. And obviously, Luke never really fulfills that position, but, it just, there were good things about it, and I have a little bit of a distaste about it as well. The really bad parts were things like milking the sea monster for some blue milk. BB-8's repair of the guns whenever Poe is going in for his suicide run and all of a sudden he loses his guns. The fact that BB-8 can just sprout a couple dozen arms to plug in all of these individual nodes to fix the guns. I mean, this is just kind of the ridiculous shenanigans that you see in Star Wars from time to time, and, maybe the kids like it. I think it's really silly. Maz's conference call. There's no reason for Maz to be in the middle of this dogfight and, be dodging laser blasts and explosions while she's taking a call about, giving these guys a lead on the casino and the code breaker and all this stuff. This was simply a scene to sell action figures. I mean, it is completely irrelevant other than just corporatizing your movie and oh, that was cool. I mean, this is just silly. Timing issues with the casino run. Okay, so if you have the ability to jump to light speed and go all the way over to this casino planet, or casino on a planet, whatever, and you have time to find a code breaker and get into jail and break out of jail and then escape and get back to the team, why aren't you going towards bigger, better allies? I mean, what happened between episode 6 and 7 and 8 that the entirety of the Republic is just gone? I know you blew up like 5 planets with the 3rd Star Destroyer, not Star Destroyer, Death Star, but there are really no allies to the Rebellion ever again after everything we saw in episodes 4, 5, and 6. That's a little incredulous. And the fact that you can't, the fact that this entire run took place during the chase of the Rebellion trying to get away and the First Order chasing them until they ran out of fuel, you have this entire, in the span of that chase, you have the time to fly out to this planet with a casino and find a code breaker and come back and have that entire run be irrelevant. The timing issues there are troublesome. It's not all bad, though, because the casino, I thought, was actually pretty cool. It's really showing a different side of the Star Wars universe. It kind of gets into that gray area of arms dealers selling to both sides. I think something like that has a lot of potential in a Star Wars universe. I think that's really cool. But how much did it make sense to show it in that way? I mostly just have timing issues with the run that Finn took to get there and get back. The casino itself, I thought, was pretty cool, pretty different, and really kind of does open up a new facet into Star Wars that, maybe we haven't seen before. But really, to kind of sum up the entirety of what was wrong in this movie was all the gotchas. I mean, this movie was literally just a... this was just directors and writers going out to a Reddit thread and looking at all the things that people wanted in this movie and saying, okay, we're going to tease all of these things, and then halfway through the movie, gotcha, we're not actually going to do that. We're going to throw in this twist. Rey's family. Kylo Ren is teasing Rey's family from the word go in this movie. And then you find out at the end, oh, there's nothing there. That's a total red herring. Her family is nobody. She comes from nothing. She's just a Mary Sue because we can't write very well. Kylo Ren's redemption. He's in a perfect place to turn around and redeem himself. And instead of taking the path of the redemption that, maybe at this point would be a trope in Star Wars, but he becomes the worst bad guy villain you can imagine. Holdo versus Poe. Poe goes to Holdo and says, hey, what is our plan? And she's just like, oh, we're just going to go in that direction until we run out of fuel. This is a terrible explanation. All you have to say there is we're going to a resistance base where we can survive. And instead of doing that, they have this big, inane argument between each other. And Poe is left feeling like he has to do something to save the Resistance, or else they're all going to die. Then you have the whole side quest with Finn going to the casino planet. You know, in this entire sequence of events, you have two more gotchas, because Finn is going to save the Republic. Finn's plan is going to save the Republic. They are going to be the good guys who, even though there's a detractor from within the Resistance, they are going to overcome those odds, and they're going to play hero. Gotcha, everything they just did was for nothing. Holdo is coming across as this dictator who's going to sink the rebellion, and all of a sudden, no, gotcha, I actually have a great plan, and I'm an honorable person, and I'm going to go down with the ship to give us better odds. Again, this is just like painting this thread for half the movie and then twisting it at the end. The code breaker, you never get to the good code breaker at all. You get to this code breaker that they happen to share a cell with, and despite the fact that he comes on and starts helping them, he's going to betray them in the end. Gotcha again. Snoke is the big bad. Snoke is this big monster who, we don't have any idea where he comes from, what his backstory is, where he, anything like that. But he is more of a Palpatine figure. He is kind of like the big bad that we're used to seeing in this. And instead of getting any kind of explanation on where he comes from, we get another gotcha. He just dies and that's it. Luke is speaking towards the duality of the Force in the first half of this movie. He's saying the Jedi need to go. He's really flirting with this gray area that, people want to see in Star Wars, or at least I want to see. Some people don't care, but Luke is flirting with the entire movie until at the end he's like, oh, no, just kidding. I'm on the Force of Good. I'm going to do all these things for the Force of Good, and that's going to be the end of my diatribe. There were even things small in this movie. I mean, like, just really little things that it doesn't matter that they gave you a gotcha on. They're just silly. Like, Luke says the line, the Force isn't about moving rocks. And then how does Rey save the Resistance? She moves rocks. I mean, it's a really small thing, but it's just another gotcha that they slipped in there. This entire movie was writing to one plot and then intentionally throwing a wrench in the cogs on like 9 or 10 different subplots. And it just seems so incredibly forced. It seems so incredibly twisting for the sake of twisting. I really didn't enjoy any of that. There were a couple of redeeming things about the movie. There were some cool fight scenes. There were, different parts about this. But this was really an action movie from beginning to end. You got a lot of, cool CGI. There wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of meaningful dialogue. Compared to earlier movies, there was some, but not a lot. And I didn't feel captivated. I mean, it was really kind of disappointing for me from beginning to end. And kind of to be snarky and kind of steal a line from the movie. A lot of people are loving this movie. They think it's engaging, a good story, holds up repeated viewings, ushers in the newer generation, things like that. But unfortunately, I have to say, there isn't a single thing in that argument that is true. I was deeply disappointed with this movie, and I don't have a lot of expectation for where they're going with 9. This just feels like a new age Hollywood movie that misses out on a lot of the things that made Star Wars what it was. So, if you stuck with me for this almost 30-minute long video, I appreciate it. Obviously, this is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me all you want. But that was my reaction. I'm still pretty disappointed. And yeah, that's it.